Jenks Road, and it's downtown, but it's not real downtown. Oh, okay. So you're very familiar. Oh, okay. Okay.
I know.
Old string back.
Yeah, that's what happened back in my day. Yeah, so I sent Andre there. I said, hey, we need to get together because we need to go at the time we start working and stuff. And she said, we don't do it. There's really nothing to do. There, yes, sir. Good morning, sir. How are you doing? Did you? Morning, guys.
Yes. Okay. Well, that's I know.
That's great.
You know, the cost of living is just so much lower than we want to live in apartments. It's a small town, and renovated this one back in 1958. That's perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Welcome to our September meeting of the Economic Development Authority. We have our agenda before us and we'll get started.
Mr. Bailey?
Yes, ma'am. Present.
Mr. Hunter?
Here.
Mr. Kelly?
Here.
Ms. Lucas Burke?
Here.
Mr. Thomason?
Here.
Mr. Thompson? You have a quorum.
Great. Take a look at our minutes from our August 19th meeting, and our commissioners have had an opportunity to review those. And if there are any changes to be noted, I'll entertain those now. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Bailey?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hunter?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Ms. Lucas Burke?
Yes.
Mr. Thomason?
Yes.
Motion carries. Minutes are approved.
Next on our agenda is our financials for August 2014, and we'll hear from Ms. Lane.
All right, so, 2014 is still, FY14 still isn't closed, so we have a summary for August. At the end of August, your account balances were $2,032,753, and that is not less your expenses. From pool cash, your expenses were the economic development grant for port event of $10,000, the development property expenses, as well as your 311 county expenses, with the total expenses for the month of August of $17,782.
This is a vote item, it's not a vote item.
No, it's not, it's just information right now.
Yes, ma'am. Well, the FY14, we're hoping to close this month,
This month.
yes.
So at our next meeting, we may have.
So hopefully the next meeting we'll have all of the official statements.
When you say hoping to close, is there anything that we should expect that it shouldn't get closed, or is there something?
Well, it's still getting everything in from the city, cause everything runs in the same system. So right now, both FY14 and 15 are running, so the rollover balances haven't closed out for the year yet, which kinda makes it problematic, cause all of the expenses from FY14 are still rolling into 15. Which means expenses would be too high. So run these statements currently.
Downsize.
But it's not
Well, but that's
unusual.
This happens.
Yeah, I was gonna say, but that's more of a city thing, that doesn't have anything to do
Correct, it has nothing to do.
But it's
Yeah.
not unusual, is it, that for us to have a month or two of sort of limbo like this, and then play catch up after the books are 14, prior year's books are closed out.
Any more comments? Entertain a motion for approval. Well, no vote, right. All right, we'll move into our new business, and we have our 700 Crawford Street, and we'll hear from Mr. Wilson. 700 Crawford Street, you have an update for us?
Update, the 700 Crawford Street property is the piece of property that's across Crawford Street from the old Civic Center. It's a former police headquarters, and council intends to, it's owned by the city. Council intends to transfer it to the EDA. You have a resolution in front of you that authorizes that conveyance, and it's really pretty simple.
That's a copy of the resolution, and
That's the
you all
council
actually
resolution.
don't have it. That's the resolution
I'm sorry.
from last Tuesday when council passed a resolution saying that they wanted to convey the property from the city to the EDA, and at a later date, because the board has recommended that we do a cooperation agreement to accept that property, but at a later date, probably at the October meeting, EDA will pass a resolution to accept the property and do a cooperation agreement with the city.
That's the normal practice in conveying property from the city to the EDA. The city and the EDA agree on the terms of the conveyance on the, and I guess primarily on what happens to the proceeds of the property sold. So that would be before you at your October meeting.
Does the city council have to vote again, or are we done?
You're done. You've authorized the city manager to execute the deed.
And that building is where the police, some of the police operations are housed currently, and they will be relocated. Any other comments, commissioners? We'll move to our section of our agenda for old business, and first up is our Midtown Marketplace, and Ms. Callie.
Just wanted to let everybody know that with a lot of good help from Mr. Wilson's office and Jeff Miller in particular, we have closed on the transaction with the Ellis Gibson's folks, and so they now have title to everything but that corner parcel that the EDA retained. They will begin construction very soon on the strip that will be adjacent to the Kroger Marketplace. That strip will include a TJ Maxx, a Cato Fashion, a Hibbett Sports, and a couple of other shops. They will also be selling a parcel, one of the out parcels at the main entrance to Wendy's, and Wendy's will be under construction very soon with the hopes of opening before Christmas. And then they are working to finish lining up the tenants in the small shops building on the out parcel where the Dunkin' Donuts will be the corner drive-through. So they are moving swiftly. Their plan is to have the strip with the TJ Maxx open late spring, early summer, and be able to fill out that Dunkin' Donut building and have that open next summer as well. So that's progressing nicely. And the Kroger Marketplace is moving forward. They have a temporary CO and are doing a number of things on the interior so they can stock the shelves, and they anticipate being open on Wednesday, October 15th. So mark your calendars. We don't have any invitations of any sort of grand opening at this point, but I would expect them to be doing something, and certainly will be providing more contact information for their guest list. I don't think it will be of the magnitude of the groundbreaking that they did, because their goal that day will actually be to have shoppers in there shopping and buying and spending money, but they will be doing something, even if it's a little more low key than what they did.
We'll do that too.
Yes.
Yes, so please spend some money there as well. So that is it's coming along nicely.
With the Wendy's, do we know if
They do have their local agent has a contract to market it and has listed that property and is in the stages of negotiating a new tenant to the Portsmouth market for the building. I don't have any particulars because they are still in negotiations and have not gone public with who it is.
So the anticipation is at this point is that another restaurant will be in there.
I don't know that it would be a restaurant. I do know it would be someone new to Portsmouth. And it is a national chain.
All of that's good news for Portsmouth. Next on our agenda is Harbor Vista, and we have more information from Ms. Galloway.
Well, and actually, we're in luck today. It just so happens that the developer, Tim Faulkner with the Breeding Company, is with us on another matter, and so I'm going to ask him if he would, if he could give us a little update on the progress on the site plan and the financing and the closing on that project. It's all positive. I'll ask Mr. Faulkner to share that.
Good morning. I wanted to give you a little update. We have been in parallel with HUD as well as plan approval, moving the process forward. We have currently have a tentative closing date of November the 15th. We think we have high confidence level that we will complete all the plan approval and HUD approval and everything that's necessary to keep the project moving. And then once we get the closing done, we're in position to start construction, the next day is what our intent is. We were able to work out with the city of Portsmouth, the water sewer program that is on the street out there, so that once the street is all paved and everything, we're not going back into the street and tearing it back out to make our connections. So we were able to do that amendment with EDA, and that is all progressing, as you can see out there. So we're on track for November 15th is our target closing.
Yes.
And next up is mile 3101 Dartmouth Street, open by the Frederick.
And you all should have received this resolution in your packets on Friday. If you'll recall, over the last several years, between the EDA and the Toys, it should be kind enough to make some copies since you're here later. Thank you. My apologies. As you'll recall, over the last several years, this body, along with the Portsmouth Port Industrial Commission, set out to acquire the first series of homes on Frederick Boulevard at the corner across from the old IC Norcom site, with the idea of creating some sort of park and buffer between the development that would take place on the Norcom site and the West Haven neighborhood. This 3101 Dartmouth Street is the last home. It was sort of the holdout that was never acquired, and the possibility of acquiring it came up some months ago, maybe as much as 6 or 12 months ago, and you all did vote to agree to acquire that home. We have now worked out all the kinks, and as you will see, and I do apologize you didn't get it in advance, so if you want me to read it and bump the vote down till later in the meeting, we certainly can. But this is a resolution just reiterating the action you all already took that said that you would acquire this home. The way it's going to work is it will immediately be transferred to the city. They will take it from there. We're simply the conduit to acquire the property. The EDA will be reimbursed for its acquisition of the property from two different sources. One is from some CDBG funds that the planning department has, and if needed, we can ask Bob Baldwin, who's here with us as director of planning, to comment on that. And then the other is from some gateway funds that the city has. So in this scenario, you all are simply the conduit to acquire this, immediately turn it over. In fact, the resolution authorizes the conveyance of the property directly to the city after you all close on it, which current closing is anticipated for September 29th. So September 29th. So with that, I'll entertain any questions. I'm not sure that Director of Planning and Town Council would like to help me out on anything like that.
Correctly, we initially spoke, last spoke to this in closed session. We had anticipated budget, I'm trying to remember what that was.
The appraisal that we had done in December was recently updated, and the price came in very close to it at about 161, excuse me, the appraisal came in at about 85,000. We're actually paying about 162,000 for it, because that's the outstanding note on the property. CDBG will pay up to the appraised value, and then the gateway funds will pay the balance.
So we, I'm just trying to remember all the details of it, so that's what our goal was not to allow the owner to profit from it, but to be able to get out from underneath it.
She will not be profiting whatsoever. This is the actual payoff amount on her
Okay.
note. She's in over her head. And it is in line with what we have been, what between this
Mhm.
body and the other body paid over the years for the other 6, 7, or 8
Mhm.
homes.
I was just trying to bring all that forward to make sure we were all clear.
That's right. But the out-of-pocket there is no out-of-pocket to this body. We're the conduit for that.
So I'm looking for a motion. So move to approve the resolution. Second.
All right, Mr. Bailey?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hunter?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Ms. Lucas Burke?
Yes.
Mr. Thomason?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Motion carried.
All right, our next agenda item is Victory Village, and we're updated again with Ms. Scotty.
I'll just give you a quick rundown, and then I'll turn it over to representatives of the Victory Village group. As you all will remember, we spent some time at the retreat in May going over the history and the timeline. What we are discussing today specifically is the developer's interest in rezoning the property, and as you'll recall, when we went through the topic of the retreat, we were reminded that in March of 2013, the developers began meeting with the city manager and council to request amendments to their master plan and their design standards, which would include the need for rezoning. In April of that same year of 2013, staff began meeting with the developer on their master plan and design standards. In fall of 2013, and one or two of you all may have attended this, the developer held a community meeting out at Vitawee to present the master plan changes that they were proposing, and they were reminded that those modifications would require rezoning. And then, as of May, they had continued to have dialogue about a rezoning, but were waiting to formalize it and to submit an application. And they're with us today to bring us up to speed on where they are on that rezoning application and their timeline and process for that. And I know they've been meeting with the Director of Planning, and he's here with us as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to Burl Saunders, who is one of the partners in Victory Crossing Developers LLC too.
Good morning. It's good to be here. We've been working with, as you may know, Breeden Company and Tim Faulkner here, and we're here to talk about getting the zoning basically in coordination with your new zoning process. You put together a whole new zoning some years ago, and this property is one of the few that's not in coordination with that. So in talking with the city, we wanted to look at what made the most sense. And we've been advised by the planning department that a general mixed-use zoning is really what should be planned here and be coordinated over the property. So, and as it's been mentioned, we've been working with the planning department to get this in concert with how the new zoning works. And we're ready to make an application to the city. Our timeline is to, one of the things in order to do that, we're co-applicants. We need the signature of the chair of the authority in order to apply along with our signature because the total property needs to go together. And so that's what we're here for. We need to get that signature. We'd like to get that signature to get into the on the 19th of this month so we can start the process. There's about a month or two process to actually take this through the whole process. We'll end up somewhere in January getting a final approval. This is part of our, our relationship with Breeden, and Tim, you may want to speak to it, but it's a very important part of this exciting project that we're talking about, and we want to be able to get that going here in the spring, summer of next year.
Yeah, so we have looked at a product out in the Victory Village that has been very successful in other locations in Richmond, Virginia, and over in Isle of Wight County. And we're using that model based on what we have done as a market study that, you know, we think it will complement the development as well as be a very successful multifamily product. So in conjunction with Burl and the Victory Village team, that's what we're gonna be putting forward, you know, as we go through this rezoning process.
This rezoning also makes it easier to start to, and we're working with other market groups to develop adjacent developments, and all of them are waiting to see this zoning put in place, because it kind of lets us really be in coordination with the city's new zoning. So our request today is just to get the application going. We'll be working with your staff and with the executive director and planning to get this all coordinated over the course of next month.
And if I understand correctly, and please tell me, let me know if I'm not right. You're suggesting a rezoning not just for the property that the Victory Village developers have already taken down, but also to include all the remaining property that the authority owns, that you all have options on, is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly. That's why we need to have a co-application. And it's, once again, you may want to, it's to actually, this is an old property positioning from the past, and you've put together a whole, you hired Wallace Robertson Todd, and they did a complete reanalysis of your whole zoning code. So this is really bringing it up into that existing new zoning and getting it coordinated with that. So it's really a very nice code. It's very exciting. So.
Do you have anything for us to review or consider, I mean, in the way of a visual or written application?
No, not today. The request today was to actually get permission to get a signature so we could proceed with the process, and then we could come back and once we're working together on that and get that done.
Just for all of the commissioners' sake, we are rezoning from a mixed use to some other, what?
Right now, I'm not sure what right now it's in a mixed use zoning position, but you now have several different mixed use zonings that you've created. One is a general mixed use, and that is the zoning that the planning department has recommended that really makes the most sense on this. So it's really, and it has the same characteristics. It's just getting it coordinated with the kind of zoning you have now in place.
I think Mr. Baldwin, if you can help clarify that for all
Sure.
commissioners.
Good morning. See what I can do here. I think you're well aware that this property and zoning goes back about 10 years. I think around 2004 is when the original zoning got put in place under the city's previous zoning ordinance. And as Burl noted, the city's zoning ordinance changed in 2010. This property is put in sort of a, I'm going to call it a holding pattern mixed-use zoning in XEMP. It's the only place that has that zoning in the city. It's really sort of waiting to be updated in a sense. There were a couple of options we looked at, potential rezoning. Two districts, general mixed use would be one. The other would be a regional activity center, RAC. That's got some issues with it in terms of this property. Basically puts you back into the same problems you have today to try to follow the regional activity center zoning. I think the issue as we have been looking at it is that the zoning in place is really made up of three components. Try to clarify this for everyone. This is conditional zoning. It's not a straight standard zoning. It's conditional zoning. So it's got proffers, or the conditions which city council adopted and has modified over the years. So you have proffers. With those proffers, there's a master plan, which was also proffered. There's also design guidelines. Those were also proffered. So when we look at development proposals, we weigh them against the zoning itself, the proffers, the design guidelines, the master plan. And I think over the years it's been concluded, as the economy has changed, the master plan's not really working. It's too prescriptive. You can't really find developers to comply with the level of detail that's in that master plan. So the idea is to create a planning category with the proffers that's more flexible, still has quality control standards in it. So What we would be looking at, and as far as the application is concerned, is we have a new application, obviously, a rewritten proffer letter, and by state and city code, the proffer letter must be signed by all the property owners, not their agent. This has to actually be signed by the owners. We'd also have a new set of design guidelines. We'd have, and then, you know, based on, and some modification of the master plan. So it's really those three components getting reworked again. Again, as we looked at it, we determined that the regional activity center requires a level of detail in the master plan, kind of puts you right back into a level of detail that's been problematic up to this point. So we're thinking that's probably, this project's not in that, in sort of a situation where that would work. General mixed use is a better category. I just mentioned one of the things we've asked them to do as far as this, when the new code went into place in 2010, a lot of the items that were originally in the design guidelines have now been picked up in the zoning code itself. So we didn't want to duplicate the zoning in the design guidelines. So in the future, if the zoning gets modified, for example, that we don't have the conflict in between the proffers and the zoning, so we're trying to clean that up. So that's where that process is from a scheduling standpoint, just sort of advise you on that. Right now, the developers are trying to get to the planning commission in November. That means our application, as far as the city's application deadline, our application deadline is Friday. We have a little bit of wiggle room in there for about a week where we can make some modifications in there, but pretty soon thereafter, you have to start to wrap up some of these details. One of the reasons being, we have to do public notice in terms of what is going to be going to the planning commission, so we have to have information regarding that. So that's sort of the process we're in. Technically, if it gets through the planning commission in November and the planning commission takes action, it's going to go to city council at their single meeting in December, which would carry them to council in January for the second reading. You know, our rezoning items go through 2 readings in city council. So that's process-wise. Where we are right now, the developers have provided us a first draft amended set of design guidelines. We got it at the end of last week. We are just starting our process internally reviewing those. So that's sort of, you know, where the planning department is in terms of documents we have in front of us.
Is the anticipated application for GMU conditional?
Yes.
Do you have the conditions, or is that what the design guidelines are?
We still need to get conditions. That would be in the proffers that go that. We do not have those at this time.
You don't have the conditions, and but the request today from the EDA is to approve an application with unknown conditions.
In essence, at this point, as I indicated, all we have are the first draft of the revised design guidelines. So yes, we don't have any proffers. I couldn't tell you what the proffers are at this time, or the master plan change, any of that.
Our request is to get an application in, but have you all review it, and if you decide you want to pull it before the time, so you do have you'll be in concert with us to review this and agree with any of the conditions we put in.
Mr. Saunders, he's correct that you can withdraw your support if you want to stay on the developer's timeline. You can approve it, and then if you don't like the conditions that are proposed, if they're not in line with what you want out there, then you can pull it, and that would affect your portion of the property. The developer can still continue with his portion, and it'll be thumbs up or thumbs down by the planning commission and the city council.
I have 2 questions. Number 1, I think you just answered it, but I want to say it again. So when we changed the whole big zoning thing in 2010, this piece was carved out and had no change.
It has a change because it had a master plan in place. The zoning
was
intended to
special.
leave it, exactly.
Okay.
This has its zoning in place. It's because it had its own master plan. It's the only place in the city that has the zoning that it has.
Okay, so that's one more. Number 2, is it the planning department's recommendation that this proceed this way so that it makes the planning department's job easier?
I wouldn't say it makes our job easier.
One
I
less
think
book to
the
look at?
question is a matter of timing. You know, like I said, our application deadline is Friday, and I don't know the meeting schedule, the EDA, you have to sign the application, the chair has to sign, the authorized to
But
sign
you're
that
in favor
application.
of this proceeding?
We're in favor of the rezoning proceeding. That part, I would say yes, we are in favor. I think we've all accepted the fact the existing master plan is not a working
Is it not
master
starting
plan.
now?
Now, what the replacement is still
That's
a work
right,
in
you got
progress.
time
But
to work
yes,
that out.
that would be yes.
And I guess I was gonna ask our counsel when he was commenting on it, if the body agreed to proceed with the application, without any information, and then decided at a later date after they had the information that they wanted to withdraw it, that's one route. The other route might be, get the information, call a special meeting for next week, because it sounds like planning has a tiny bit of wiggle room, so that if it's not in Friday the 19th with support from this body, if it were midweek next week or late next week, that's still reasonable.
From our process, we have a deadline we try to hold firm on, but there's about a week window in there where we review an application to see if it's complete. So during that week, we can add, modify, delete materials coming in to make a determination of a complete application. So that would basically say you've got about a week and a half to 2 weeks. After that, we're pretty much, we have to move with what we have.
Yeah, that's what we heard from the body of our commissioners.
Yeah,
Yes,
I just,
your question.
I guess my struggle is twofold. The first is that I've heard since I've been on the body that, oops, we didn't think about this, and now we're digging a way back out of it, and I've heard the word clawback more times than I would care to hear since I've been involved on the authority, and that the due diligence, the body did a great job with the information they had, but the unintended consequences surfaced and then had to be dealt with, and then where some of the struggles came through. And then the other side of that is that at the retreat, my takeaway was that we all understood that facilitating the continuation as quickly as possible of Victory Village was in our best interest, and how that was going to be done wasn't clear. But that we definitely might want to rethink the way that we're doing that, because what's happening isn't working right now. I am concerned about adopting something that we don't know what we're adopting, even with the way back. It just causes me pause.
And I just for clarification, with this rezoning issue, it seems that there is a current standard with the mixed use and this particular property, because of the 2010 adoption, that there is something slightly different. Without going into too much detail, what will be some of the differences with this rezoning?
Well, I would go in about 2 or 3 things in here. I think number one, you were gonna get the developers will be proposing a master plan that's not as prescriptive. It won't show all the buildings. It'll be more what we would refer to more like a land use bubble plan, or a, land use layout plan without having all the details. That's been one of the issues where the buildings have been laid out, where the roads have been sort of fixed in this master plan and they don't work, and then you're trapped. And the problem with having a master plan, just to answer that, sort of go into that a little bit, is once you get locked into that, if there needs to be a move to that turns into another rezoning. Every one of these things that gets adopted by city council, every time there's a modification, we do this exact same process again. So having a plan that's too detailed, too prescriptive, if it turns out to be a problem where they can't get it to work, it's another trip back through city council's 4-month process phase. Let me just put it in context. Here we are in September, we're talking January to be through the process, so that's what it would take. Our idea, and what's been talked about for back to 2013, was something a little bit less specific about building layouts, exact street locations.
Okay.
That'd be one thing. Design standards, what's allowed in the buildings. The existing set of design guidelines, if you've seen them, is a very large, detailed set of design standards, and they're pretty high end. And one of the issues, as we understand them, is that they're having an impact on driving up the cost of trying to bring a project through. And so part of what we'd be looking at is a set of design guidelines that still maintain a high quality standard, but again, aren't quite as detailed and prescriptive, where again, if somebody has a little bit different product, a little bit different building, that they simply can't get through the process. And it's my estimation, like you say, it's over, the current plan is over designed. To answer your question specifically, what you had as a has a master plan, a set of design guidelines, proffers, all in effect when new zoning went into place.
Right.
And so the goal of the zoning was to not affect that, to leave that as it was. And so that's why it has the zoning as. It's basically the pre-2010 zoning locked in place. And so what you'd be moving to is be going to a standard zoning where the city has, which is our general mixed use. Again, you know, the zoning ordinances have changed. The old zoning code didn't have a lot of the detailed design standards in it, the new one does. And so what we basically advise developers, we don't want to carry the zoning items into their design guidelines. So for example, if the zoning has a 10-foot setback requirement, and they put that into their design guidelines at 10 feet, and then later on city council changes the zoning and says we want it to be 20, we have a conflict. We're back dealing with you know, we've got a proffered set of standards, a zoning set of standards, and trying to avoid duplicating the zoning requirements in the design guidelines. All that being said, there are a number of issues from building materials, landscaping, signage. Just so you'll know, what we basically advising, we want this project to look like it's holding together like a whole. We don't want it to look like individual pods of things. This should look like a master plan development, the way it was intended when it started. Not necessarily that the land uses are the same, but it still looks like a cohesive community. I think that was City Council's original plan when the community college was put out there. So we've been trying to hold this thing together with, you know, some of those design elements that would create a cohesive 100-acre development out there, as opposed to, again, 3 or 4 other pieces. The other thing that we're concerned with, and we've been looking at in some of these proffers, is to be cognizant of the potential for residential development and trying to limit, you know, while you're trying to allow residential as a component. We don't want this to turn into 60 acres of apartments, you know, so we're working to make sure there's a gap either in the proffers that don't exist in the zoning, where you would limit, whether through the number of units, whether it's through limited square footage, some number to cap the amount of residential. So you do get, in fact, a mixed use, not, you know, something that's predominantly residential as opposed to a true mixed use. So there's some challenges in there. I hope I answered your question
You
there.
over-answered it.
So,
Just in summation, we're talking about the prescriptive nature of the master
Right.
plan, the development. Okay, we don't want it as detailed to bring it up to current
That's
standard.
right.
And the second distinction was the detailed nature or the number of sheets that you can find in a set of plans for that mixed use. We wouldn't need as many. We wouldn't
That's
have to
correct.
go into as
As
much
much
detail as we bring the
That's
rezoning
correct.
mixed usage ordinance
Yeah,
to
and I'll
current.
just point out, just so everybody's clear, that the set of design guidelines are adopted with what the developer brought in, so this isn't, I was working through with city staff, but what you have in place is actually what they brought in. But I think what's happening is, as they try to go to find someone to develop it, you realize the design standards are just, again, too detailed. And I don't think from a land use planning standpoint, you need to get quite into the light fixture elements and certain elements in there that we've got in there. And that, again, every time that comes up, that becomes a review issue for us. Every little detail in those design guidelines, we then have to look for compliance. And so, as you can imagine, that's, you gotta be careful. I'll just put it that way. You have to be careful how much you put in your design guidelines. If you can't live with them, you don't wanna get, you know, have them adopted by city council ultimately. So that becomes the law of the land, as far as we're concerned.
I can't help but wonder, not having been on the authority when the original deal was struck with the Victory Village, and again, I want to emphasize, we want Victory Village to move forward. I don't mean to sound like I'm trying to limit it. I just think we have a responsibility as this body to be really asking some really good questions. My perception of understanding some of the deals that have gone on from the authority, the attractiveness of this deal and the willingness to sell it at the price it was based upon the fact that there was such a detailed master plan that we said, that's the kind of product we want to have in our city, and we're willing to make a concession on the price because of the benefit to the city. And now we're making a concession on the project, and price was set based upon a project, and we're not getting that product. So we're not really getting what we paid for in essence, or what we were selling it for. I'm asking that as a question, I'm not necessarily making that statement, but haven't we done deals like that? Well, there's going to be a benefit to the city. Since we're going to get this benefit, our job is to facilitate these developments from happening, facilitate these to happen.
But I believe what was driving the willingness to sell it at a certain price was a combination of the design and the infrastructure, because the authority did not have the ability to put the road network that is already in place and the curb gutter, drainage, water, sewer, and lighting that is in place. So it was a combination of, we would discount the land in exchange for the developer would be responsible for all that infrastructure as well as the adopted design and
Which gave us
standards that we
TCC,
talked
don't
about.
forget.
Pardon?
We had to have that for TCC.
That's right, when, in order to get TCC, the developer took care of that road network for TCC.
Yeah, there was a substantial investment, and that actually starts to have an effect on the ordinance, sets the value of the land, the price. And TCC wouldn't have been connected if we hadn't put that road network in, and it's pretty detailed and very high-end roadways and sidewalks and lighting systems. I think the real thing here, and Bob kind of hit on it, it's the flexibility to be able to make a deal when it happens for the benefit of everybody here, and whether it's on the land that we have or the land you have, it's that flexibility. A lot of people throughout the Commonwealth have had to go back and revisit their thinking in the early 2000s and how things are done now. But when you get this really prescriptive where it has to go to council each time, it doesn't allow you the flexibility to make adjustments to get it done. Now, you have a design review committee too. I just want to remind you that reviews everything we do. So you're engaged in the process of the quality of what we're building. It's not we're not out there alone just doing it. So we're in it together.
Okay, I think we've been educated to this issue. I guess now, commissioners, our task is do we vote on this, or do we come back for a special session? Do we go in and allow the application to go in and to make changes? So that's the discussion that we need to have to move this forward.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask one
Yes.
question? If the application, if we accept to take the application today, how soon will the conditions be put in place that we're concerned about? Are we talking a month out, are we talking 2 months out, or?
We've already submitted the revised design criteria and in the process of meeting with staff and going through it. And we're just trying to work through the details of making sure, what's in the code is, we got it coordinated. So we're in that process right now. Bob can speak to their timing on that. And, we're willing to do whatever it takes to come back and meet with anybody with staff and work with you on it, so.
Sure, my question was more directed towards our planning side.
When they go into effect, when city council adopts a zoning change.
Unless there's a different effective date in the ordinance.
Right.
But normally they would go into effect the date of the second reading. And that would be, at this point, January, if you follow the time.
Okay, and you mentioned one of the other things you could do is the body could always withdraw support if they felt necessary.
Yeah.
What is the timetable with that? We meet monthly, so if we're talking before January, there's a little bit of time there to really we have time to look at what we have in front of us.
Be before the application is before planning commission.
I would request if you're gonna withdraw your support to be before it goes to the planning commission.
Yeah.
If the application's not signed, it's not, let me just sort of clarify our position. We don't have a signed endorsed application for all the property owners. It's an incomplete application, it doesn't go anywhere.
And there are 3 property owners involved at this point.
So we would
The
need everyone to
developer,
sign.
Senator Lucas, and the EDA.
Yeah, and now, Bob, what happens if at some point after it goes to planning commission, the EDA determines it wants to withdraw its support? Then the application can continue without the EDA portion, is that
It
correct?
could, yes.
But then it's still gotta go to city
And
council.
city
So,
council
yeah,
decides they
it
wanna split.
continues, but
And
without the
The
EDA.
EDA even has an opportunity to interact with the planning commission and/or request a joint meeting. I mean, be part of the process.
We have opportunities to get involved. We want
We've got tons of opportunities
We
to
want
be-
continuity, conditions put the continuity in.
I put in consideration flexibility, and the fact that I think that the mixed-use zoning preferences are necessary. It seems that we're streamlining a process which is making our city more attractive to not just this development project but future developers. With that being said, I'd like to make a motion that, we give out, our nod to the, signature of the application.
I'd like to just amend that motion to include that we have some type of monthly review as part of the docket between now and then, so that we can continue to keep this in front of us, whether it's through the developer, whether it's through the planning director, but some type of an update that we have at each one of the meetings, so that we, or at least staying on top of it, we don't get into December and go, okay, now our backs are against the wall again, and we're forced to make a decision.
One aspect, is this, George, is this considered a conditional approval, that pending this body getting the application and the proffers?
No, I can, you could make it conditioned on that, but that just sort of muddies the water. If you go ahead and approve it, you still have the right to withdraw it if you don't receive it, if you're not satisfied with the progress. And as far as the monthly updates, or more frequent, if there's something that occurs that you need to be notified of before your regular meeting, I think that's a great idea. Because you've got ownership of this until council changes the zoning. And you need to maintain your oversight of what's happening with the property. If it gets to just before the planning commission, and you haven't seen property number one, or if what you see you don't like, then if you've got a regular meeting, you can vote to withdraw it. If you call it a special meeting, vote to withdraw your support. But you need to know what's going on.
My intention in the way that I was making the amendment to Mr. Thompson's motion was that we were approving the application. We're just keeping ourselves involved in the process in case we overlook something, not to have it conditional to pull it back at a moment's notice. Again, we want Victory Village to move forward. We just want to do our due diligence because we have had issues with deals that were unintended consequences.
You just want your staff to keep you updated.
Right, just
All of
put it on the agenda for the next
And they
week.
do that anyway.
But I would second the motion that Mr. Thompson put forward.
The amendment?
Well, I don't think we have to.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Do you amend, or do you wanna keep your standing motion?
The standing motion's fine.
We can ask staff to put it in the monthly meetings.
So we have a motion and a second, all in favor? Would you vote?
Mr. Bailey?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hunter?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Ms. Lucas Burke?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
I'm still not clear as to the motion. Could somebody please iterate the motion?
I have that it's to approve the application for rezoning for Victory Village from mixed use employment center to general mixed use conditions.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson? Motion carries.
Thank you for the discussion. All right, and we'll move to our next agenda item, which is our 311 County Street property.
As you all may have read or seen, the city of Portsmouth is acquiring 801 Water Street, the building behind City Hall, with the intent of moving all of the police operations, or the majority of the police operations, into that building, which includes the police operations that are in 311 County Street, the building that will over in Bristol Square. And the chairman has received notification as permitted by the lease that you all inherited for that space and property, of a 90-day notice from the city that the police department will be vacating that first floor space on or about mid-December. So that ground floor is now available to be marketed. I will add that I have an interested prospect, and at one point in time you all had considered having an agent, I believe John Profile, who is very familiar with that property, help us market that building, and I'd be interested in whether or not you all would like us, now that we have the entire ground floor available for lease, if you all have any interest in signing him as a listing agent to help us lease that property. We do have, and it is on your agenda for next month, I think you saw it on your cover note, the gentleman, the Chief Operating Officer from ODU, coming in to give an overview to the full commission about any idea for an accelerator program, and whether or not this body has any interest in pursuing that.
it in.
knows, that's a, the avenue we take, that we might be sitting on the property for a while.
For the upstairs.
For the upstairs. Do we know where we are on the improvements we authorized to have in that building?
Yes, the contractor has been selected. You will authorize that a month ago. And the General Services Department had a pre-construction meeting scheduled. Somebody was out sick and they had to reschedule that. So that should be taking place this week so that they can proceed with those lobby improvements, which will be an added benefit in trying to market that ground floor, first floor space of that building.
And Mr. Proctor, how many properties right now does he represent for us?
He doesn't represent any for us at this time. He does handle the 355 Crawford Street building down the street and has represented that property for years. He's a very knowledgeable office leasing agent.
And
that's all
FYI,
that's fine.
very well. He's also, Mr. Bailey's, I think he's fabulous personally.
I've known him for 25 years. He's very, very well regarded and excellent office leasing agent.
Very responsive.
So I think it would be helpful to find someone to help lease that space so that we don't take on that overhead of the ground floor and for another year until the business incubator gets into with us.
I think that it's, as quickly as we can move it without being pushed, we can get a commitment from Mr. Hornick as to whether or not we're gonna move forward. Because if we're a year out, and we don't have any kind of commitment to that, we could be a year from now and then go, okay, now we gotta do something with the upstairs. Although we may have I don't know Mr. Profile myself, I'm sure he could do a fine job. I don't mean to question him whatsoever, but the property could be sitting there for any length of time. Our initial, let me back up, we have to be so careful about what we say. My takeaway from some of our initial conversations about acquiring this property was, first and foremost, we thought we could do the city some good and pretty much break even with the police and hopefully expand it for additional use for the city. It looks like that's not gonna be viable. His incubator was an afterthought to that, and I'm certainly okay with doing that if we can help support that, but I think that's something the authority should be doing. But I think we were trying to really not be landlords was my takeaway from that. It met some of our goals is why we did it, so is there any reason why we wouldn't look at selling the property as well?
Well,
I mean, Mr. Hornick isn't gonna make a commitment.
and not only that, you gotta bear in mind that, it's not gonna bring any cash to the floor at all. I mean, from my understanding, we were on the lease this thing for upwards of 5 years at $1 a month. I mean, it's ridiculous. Not to mention the on-take of maintenance and, possible utility expenses, and if and when money was generated from the leasing perspective, it would be kicked back to the university to offset cost of, the people that are.
We're most likely gonna have leasehold improvements for the lower level now as we attract the clients as well too, so we're gonna spend even more money.
Exactly.
If Mr. Harmon does come back and wants to do this, and we have already built that building, I mean, we can easily find another spot here in the
Yeah,
city to put them. So, I
absolutely.
mean, we don't have to tie our hands on this other project.
Exactly.
If they wanted to do business here, I'm sure our department would certainly find a place for them to.
And we also can consider marketing as well for sale. Why not?
Actually, we could even, if we had to provide a grant, it would be the same cost as if we wanted to for them to get another property here, right? Correct?
Be cheaper.
One of my biggest bone of contention is that the property hasn't been marketed. That's why I voted no for the improvements, because we acquired it, so I think it's a great step forward. We're now gonna have Mr. Percolate market it, whether it's for sale or whether it's for lease, but at least get it out there, get some sort of interest in it.
I know the discussions over the consensus is to hire
And that is the recommendation that's coming from staff.
The staff thinks that sale and lease is appropriate?
That we hire Mr.
Mr.
Profile.
Profile to
Mr.
market it.
Profile, to market the property, and we can bring him in and also get his perspective as an office leasing brokerage agent as well as recommendations on as to do both.
Do you think we can get him to give us some, to speak to that at our next meeting?
Yes.
And if that way we can have a little more information and shelf the conversation to the next meeting, is that appropriate?
Do we need to make a motion? Our next agenda item is our local incentive program review, and we have, Ms. Wilson give us a presentation.
And I'll just introduce the topic once again. You'll recall that we've had some conversation on and off over the last couple of months as different projects have come, different applications for this program have come to you all. And the idea today is to, we finished a year, we're kicking off the second fiscal year of this program. We all have made modifications with each fiscal year. So the idea today is just sort of as an all-encompassing overview of the program, how it came to be, how you all adopted the local incentives that you are endorsing through it, where we are, and then have a opportunity over the next 2 or 3 or 4 months to evaluate the program and decide what, if any, changes you want to implement for FY16 that would begin on July 1 next year. So with that, Joy Wilson is our administrator of the program.
I'll start just a second. I'm just handing out the presentation that I'll make to you, and these are the applications for each of the programs. And if you don't need them, I'll take them back because I use them to do the applications, of course. I only made 10 copies, so if you need a copy of it, I'll be glad to provide you with one.
Yes, I do.
Sure. What I'd like to go over this morning is 5 main items. What is the incentives program? A timeline of when we started this which was back in 2012. An overview of all 4 of the grants, which I have a copy of, and also what is in the pipeline for the program right now, what's been closed, what is set to close, and an overview of your financials. So what the program is really what came out of the Downtown Portsmouth Economic Development Plan from about 2 years ago, which was a plan of work document. It was a really thick document. I have a copy of it here if you'd like one, and I also have that available online. This was a program that we put together as staff as an economic development program for downtown Portsmouth exclusively. Out of that program, or that plan, was a section for incentives. There were about 12 incentives. It was 10 incentives and 2 loan programs that were a part of that program. It was presented to the EDA for funding, and the EDA decided to fund about 4 of those programs out of that at that time. Staff is actually responsible for administering the program and managing it within the parameters that have been adopted by the Economic Development Authority. It started off as a downtown plan. It has been extended to 3 additional business districts, which include Craddock, Midtown, Uptown District, and also Port Norfolk. So here's a timeline of this program. A lot of you were here when we started this, so some of this will be repetitive, but I'd like to go over it in detail for those of you that need a refresher or that weren't here at that time. Starting back in March 2012, staff met with downtown business owners that had some concerns about the development of downtown and wanted to bring some of their ideas forward. Between March and November, we worked on our first plan, and that was a draft plan, and we got feedback in November from the business owners at that time. In December, the draft plan was presented again to some of the stakeholders in downtown and some of the business owners for feedback again. Those stakeholders involved 2 EDA members at that time. In April 2013, the plan was presented to other departments and other department heads for their feedback because, like I mentioned before, the plan was comprehensive and involved other city departments, and we got their feedback. In June of last year, the plan was presented or introduced to the EDA for the first time. In July, we had that really long, intense meeting where we went over page by page of that downtown Portsmouth Economic Development Plan and got some feedback on your thoughts and how you wanted to see this thing go forward. In July of a year ago, it was actually adopted by the EDA, and when I say adopted, I mean just those 4 incentive programs that came out of that, not the whole plan. I'm sorry, in August that happened. And it was also presented to the city council at that time as well, shared with them at a presentation. And in September, 1 year ago, we started marketing the program. We were already about 3 months into the fiscal year when we started marketing and accepting applications at that time. That brings us to earlier this year. The plan, or an overview of the plan, was presented to the EDA in February. and a discussion about what will be happening in the next fiscal year as we prepared for the budgeting for the authority for FY 14, or 15 rather. In April of this year, the EDA agreed to 2 policy changes, which was to extend those boundaries officially and also to allocate $300,000 for FY 15. In May of this year, there was a consensus that was reached to allow administrative approval for the Windows of Opportunity grant and the Safety and Security grant, and also to keep the process of pre-approval and require a vote from the authority for the facade improvement grant and the interior build-out grant, which is new for FY 15. Because the boundaries were officially changed, it was changed from the Downtown Portsmouth Economic Development Program to the Local Incentives Program. That brings us up to September, where we're doing an overview of this program, and going forward, we'll have the opportunity to discuss it more in depth and to go over any possible changes for FY 16 rather. So here's your first grant, is the facade improvement grant, and this is just an overview of what it is. It's a grant that is provided to a property owner in any of the districts for improvements to the outside of the space. It's a 50% reimbursement for the applicant's investment up to $25,000. It requires a pre-approval to come to this authority and to be voted on for approval. The safety and security grant is for safety and security systems like surveillance cameras or new locks or doors or windows or locks on windows to a property, a commercial property. And this is a 100% reimbursement up to $2,000, and it requires an administrative approval from staff. The Windows of Opportunity grant is targeted to property owners with vacant properties that are at the street level, that it looks like an empty space on the inside. It provides a window wrap for the property. It's a 100% reimbursement up to $2,000, also requires administrative approval. And finally is the interior build-out grant. This one is brand new. We don't have any applications right now. There is some strong interest for it. I hope to have an application for you at your next meeting. And this is for tenant improvements, or it's to take a space that's very rough, to take it to a vanilla shell space, which is a clean space. It includes HVAC and plumbing and flooring and walls, to take it to a plain space that would be attractive to any tenant, or to take a vanilla shell space to a build-out so that it can be built out for a particular tenant or maybe a buyer. This one is a 50% match up to $10,000, which is less than the facade improvement grant, and requires a pre-approval and to be brought to this authority for vote and approval. Let me stop right here and take a moment to see if anyone has any questions they'd like to ask at this time. Okay, here's your pipeline. The top chart is from FY 14 and what has come through, closed, and paid. It was about $35,000 from last fiscal year. That was FY 14. For FY 15, we have several facade improvement grants that are pending. One that is paid, that's the 355 Crawford. And then below that, we have one is a safety and security grant and the Windows of Opportunity grant. We've had one of those that have paid so far as well. Any questions on this slide? There's 9 pending, 2 have been paid.
I had a question, I'm trying to get a reminder on 632 High Street and 702 High Street.
Right, 632 High Street was Geneva Gray. She came in for an application. It used to be an antique shop.
Oh,
It's
correct.
between the dress shop and Ma Maison. It's a vacant space. It's about 2,500 square feet, and they're getting a facade done right now. It's actually was almost finished last week. The other vacant space, the 702, is that empty space beside Gosport. Those applications came in together. One was for the outdoor eating space at Gosport, and the other was for that vacant space beside it.
Thank you.
So here's an overview of your financials, and this gives you a perspective of how much money is left from what was allocated. So we have about 46%, or it's about $68,000 that's remaining that can be allocated for the facade improvement grant for this fiscal year. Like I said, there are no interior build-out grants at this time. I do expect at least 1 application in October, maybe 2. For the Windows of Opportunity grant, 1 has paid out. That leaves us with about what's been allocated for that, about $9,000 remaining. And for the Safety and Security grant for FY 15, there's about $8,400, 85% of what's left that can be allocated or earmarked for applications that come in this fiscal year.
Hey, Tori, just one thing I want to be clear about, the interior build-out grant is specifically for buildings that currently don't have a tenant in them, correct?
Right.
Okay,
Mhm.
thank you.
That's right. So here is a summary of what we've just gone over. The local incentives program is really what came out of that downtown Portsmouth economic development plan, only the incentive section. It was an entire comprehensive plan, but there was one small incentive section, and that is what has developed into a local incentives program. It is available for downtown, midtown, uptown, Craddock, and Port Norfolk. Those 4 grants, facade improvement, safety and security, windows of opportunity, interior build-out, are managed and administrated by this department, economic development staff, within the parameters that are agreed upon by this body. The program has been underway for 1 full fiscal year, but there was a considerable amount of history, as I discussed before, that goes back to 2012 with the discussion and the work on this program by staff and the authority. 8 properties have been assisted by this program so far, and there are 9 properties that are in the queue. And there is some strong interest in the interior build-out grant. As I mentioned, I hope to bring one of those forward in October. And 1/3 of the funding has been encumbered within the first 25% of this fiscal year.
And Toy's being very liberal when she says that it's administered by this department. It's administered by Toy. You're looking at
She does a great job with this.
the staff for this program.
Great job on that presentation. Mr. Bailey, I know that you had some concerns last meeting about the churches and the grants, so this is your segue to.
Well, the concerns I have, I mean, this is a great project, great job. This is all great. But, you know, we have some nonprofits in the city that don't pay any taxes, get rebates. There is, me as a small business owner, I'm taxed to death. So what I'm saying, moving forward, I've got nothing against churches. Please, I've got nothing against nonprofits. But this needs to be a little bit more streamlined to business owners. The other thing I'd like to see changed, I'm going to use Ms. Gray as an example. Here we gave her a grant, but we have no lease, no prospective tenant. So here we're outlaying this money with no tenant in place. Now, she did say that she did have a prospective tenant. I think moving forward, we need to have some sort of signed lease in place. So if we offer this money to a vacant building, like a build-out or a build-in, we're not just doing it to make it pretty.
And if I can project, and this is, you know, we have several months here to have conversation and to review each of these and the requirements or eligibility for each of these 4 grants before fiscal year 16. But I believe the premise behind these was to pretty up things, to make them attractive, to be able to get a tenant, because one of the challenges that we have with existing space is that it's not a vanilla shell, it's not inviting and pleasing facade to be able to compete with the typical suburban new construction, and therefore even in order to get to that tenant, you needed to do something to the property first.
No, I agree. But in that year, we've moved ahead. So I think in that year, if we just look at downtown and we did the pretties, it looks pretty. I'm saying moving forward, maybe I think we need to just look at, I mean, Craddock is a different example. I mean, if we've got to spend money on a building in Craddock to make it look pretty, to attract a tenant, I'm all for it. But I think in downtown, as we sit right now in this old town, I think we just need to be a little bit more selective, because what's going to happen is we're going to run out of money just now. If we start giving money to charities, churches, that really are bringing no economic benefit to the city.
Well, I guess one thing that I think about, because I understand your point about, you know, certainly part of what we want to do is drive a tax base. But I guess in thinking about that facade improvement grant, again, the whole point was facade improvement. So I would actually see it as a good thing if we ran out of money on facade improvement, because that means that $400,000, not just $200,000, has been invested in the facades up and down, you know, this main thoroughfare, which was my understanding it was kind of both our focus and the city's focus to make downtown as inviting as possible. So I mean, I guess I kind of see the other side of that. In granted, in the scheme of the overall incentive program that we have, you know, that's only one portion of the bigger pie. But personally, I'm all for this kind of grant. Certainly, if it means that, you know, the person that we're giving the money to has to match it. Because again, I mean, that's doubling our investment. If we can do that all over the city, I will vote for that all day long.
Improvements to the buildings will bring back taxes too.
Right, I mean, we've
Property
got the
improvements.
assessor sitting right here, ultimately, he's gonna come in with his hand out and collect on the other side.
Well, I thought one of the considerations that we were looking at this, while we were able to feel like it aligned with the mission or the overarching purpose of our organization, was that currently the perception of Portsmouth and Hampton Roads as a whole is that Portsmouth isn't as great as some other places. Anything we could do to make us look better, so that was a economic driver, because we need to offset that. And we have some key things working with some of the development projects that we have that do have some attention throughout the Hampton Roads region. So as people are starting to, maybe Portsmouth isn't so bad, anything we can do to make us look better was important. I said it, I think it was the very first meeting I came to, I'm over in West Norfolk, how come there's no money available for me? I have a business. And it was, the way it was responded was I drew the conclusion it was similar to when you're on an airplane and they say, you know, when the oxygen masks fall, put your mask on first, and then attend to small children and the elderly that are beside you. If we don't start developing some parts of the city and we don't start making some of it look good, we're never going to make any of it look good. And as a business owner, that was an okay answer for me. It wasn't necessarily what I like, but if I'm invested in the success of the city as a whole, I think the programs like this are extremely important, and I can see that other side of it as well too. And I would actually say that based on what I see of the funding of it, I would say that we've funded them pretty well. They're not running out real early, but they're not stockpiling. So I think we're doing really well, and I think that this is a whole new initiative, as I understand it. So coming as a commissioner, having this launch right as I came on board, I wasn't seeing it as something that had been worked on for the last decade, really to come to fruition, and the amount of work and everything that took place to even be able to offer any kind of incentive to anybody. It was a first line place to start doing something, and I think again, anytime that nonprofits or places that aren't clearly putting dollars into the city that I can clearly measure is tough to say. I think Toy needs to really be commended well at what she's done with this program. I think this is a big, it really is a big thing for our city to even have a program like this at all, compared to where we've been in the past. It's really awesome.
I have two questions for Ms. Wilson. One, what is involved with increasing the allocation of the interior build-out grant?
Well, that's up for discussion, you know, I guess in the next couple of months. This was what was adopted. Really what we have is a pool of $300,000 is really what we have, and we kind of have these buckets that we have decided. But I think there was discussion in the past that if, you know, for example, if we get down to it and we need another $50,000 to pull out of FIG to put into interior build-out, we could do that because they're just buckets, right? I mean, they're not something that we can't, because it's really the local incentives program.
And the second question I have is, I understand the concept of the Manila box and making the space more attractive to a potential client. What in the case of an existing business? You know, someone is here operating that's part of the tax base, but you see that they could utilize this type of a grant to improve an existing business with that interior build out.
Not at this time.
What would we need to do in order to make that?
I imagine we
retrofit?
can discuss it, this body could discuss those types of things in the next couple of months, and maybe something for fiscal year 16. But right now, it's designed to be a different type of animal and just to be a business attraction tool to take a space that someone cannot lease and get at least.
Do we have anything for an existing business to assist in?
Well, the facade improvement grant would be for existing, and the safety and security grant as well. will be for existing. And so like Abby's Arc was the one that came in for
For the
the
child
safety
care.
and security, and that was much appreciated. And right now, I just paid out Touch of Style Barber Shop, and we'll be paying that out soon. So they really appreciated the existing ones as well, but those are what we have for existing right now.
And Ms. Wilson distributed a copy of the application and guidelines for each of these four to you all. They are available on the web, and you have seen them before, but with the idea that over the course of the next couple of months, read them, chew them up, spit them out, and so in preparation for FY16, if there are things that as a body the group wants to amend or change or modify, that would be the time.
Just because it doesn't fit in this model right here doesn't stop anybody from getting on the agenda and reading these things.
Well, I think it's definitely been a good program.
Can I ask one
looking
quick
at
question?
the-
One
Yes,
last question.
Sean?
The Dinwiddie Hotel, where are we with that?
Well, they have signed their grant agreement. They have, I'll have to look back at my notes. They may have until maybe December to come back and finish. So they still have time. They are within their parameters right
Okay.
now, absolutely right now.
And Ms. Wilson, that's the landlord itself, right, not the tenant that's. in
Correct, the
space.
landlord, the actual
Right,
rock.
The actual, right,
Yeah.
landlord, because I
Correct.
know there is some interest from a tenant.
That's
perhaps.
right,
Correct.
and I'm in correspondence with the tenant as well on some things, so I actually hope that might be one of my interior build-out grants if we could get some things on paper.
That would
But
be
yes,
good.
they are within the guidelines that Governor Dinwiddie Hotel set the guidelines for their facade improvement grant application.
I think it's definitely been a good use of the fund, and the market, it's pretty much marketed itself, because when one business see that another business has something done and people are making comments about it, that's a good thing. And just by virtue of the fact that 8 properties have already been assisted and that there are 9 in the queue, that shows great interest that, this is something that's needed for our local program.
I think if you look at Toys Knuckles, you'll see she can do some marketing herself.
Yes.
Door to door.
That's what I said, you get your knuckles.
Okay, if there are no other comments, we're moving to our closed session, closed meeting, and we don't have any agenda items for closed meeting, so we stand adjourned, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you.